The first time I heard her voice in the middle of the night, I thought she was on the phone. That wasn't unusual. Ava Collins had moved into my apartment 11 days earlier, and from what I'd seen so far, sleep wasn't something she did very well. She was always tired. Not the normal kind of tired. Not the kind you fixed with a weekend off or an extra cup of coffee. The kind that sat behind her eyes. The kind that followed her from room to room. The kind that made someone stare at a microwave for 30 seconds without realizing it wasn't running. I noticed things. Not because I was nosy. Because when you shared an apartment with someone, you couldn't help it. You noticed the small stuff. The habits. The routines. The things people thought nobody saw. Ava left for work every morning at exactly 7:12. Not 7:10. Not 7:15. Exactly 7:12. She drank coffee like it was life support. She forgot to eat lunch at least 3 times a week. And every night around midnight, I'd hear her bedroom floor creak as she paced back and forth. Like her mind refused to shut down. I didn't know much else about her. Just that she worked in marketing. Had moved to the city 2 months ago. And was trying very hard not to talk about whatever had happened before she arrived. Most people told stories about themselves without realizing it. Ava did the opposite. Every answer she gave felt carefully measured, like she was constantly deciding what not to say. At first, I figured she simply liked her privacy. Then I started noticing the shadows under her eyes. The way she flinched whenever her phone rang unexpectedly. The way she'd stare out the kitchen window while her coffee went cold. People who were happy didn't do that. People who were okay didn't look exhausted before the day even started. But it wasn't my business. At least that's what I kept telling myself. Then came Thursday night, or technically Friday morning, 2:14 a.m. I remember because I checked the clock. I had been asleep maybe 3 hours when something woke me. At first I wasn't sure what. The apartment was quiet. The city outside had settled into that strange silence that only exists between midnight and dawn. Then I heard it. A voice. Soft. Barely above a whisper. Coming from the hallway. I frowned and sat up. Ava. The walls in our apartment were thin enough that I recognized her voice immediately. My first thought was that she was talking on the phone. Maybe an overseas call. Maybe some late-night emergency. I rolled over and glanced at the clock. 2:14. Who calls someone at 2:14 in the morning? The voice came again. Still quiet. Still impossible to understand. I threw my legs over the side of the bed. The hardwood floor felt cold beneath my feet. For a second, I considered ignoring it. Going back to sleep. Pretending I hadn't heard anything. Then I heard something else. Footsteps. Slow footsteps. Moving through the hallway. Back and forth. Back and forth. I stood and opened my bedroom door a few inches. Just enough to look out. The hallway was dimly lit by the small nightlight near the kitchen. And there she was. Ava. Standing in the middle of the hallway. Barefoot. Wearing an oversized gray sweatshirt. Her hair loose around her shoulders. Her eyes open. But somehow, not awake. She took another slow step forward. Then stopped. Her head tilted slightly. Like she was listening to someone who wasn't there. A chill ran down my spine. Because I suddenly realized something. Ava wasn't on the phone. She wasn't talking to anyone. She was sleepwalking. And whatever she was saying, she had no idea she was saying it. For a few seconds, I just stood there watching. Not because I was scared. Because I wasn't sure what to do. Ava took another slow step. Then another. Her arms hung loosely at her sides. Her face was completely expressionless. The strangest part was her eyes. They were open, looking straight ahead. But empty. Like her body was awake while her mind was somewhere else entirely. She stopped near the kitchen, turned slightly, and whispered something. I couldn't make out the words. Just fragments. Broken pieces of a conversation. Almost like she was responding to someone. My stomach tightened. There was something sad about it. Watching someone wander through their own dreams. Alone. I remembered reading somewhere that waking a sleepwalker suddenly wasn't a great idea. So I stayed where I was. Quiet. Watching. Ava moved toward the living room. Her bare feet barely made a sound against the floor. Then she stopped again. This time right beside the couch. Her shoulders sagged slightly. And when she spoke again, her voice sounded different. Smaller. Fragile. I tried. The words were barely audible. I really tried. My chest tightened. Ava swallowed. Still asleep. Still trapped somewhere between dreams and reality. I wasn't enough. The sentence hit harder than it should have. Because it didn't sound like a dream. It sounded like a memory. For a second she stood completely still. Then she lowered her head. And whispered something else. Something I almost didn't hear. Why wasn't I enough? Silence. The apartment suddenly felt much colder. I didn't know who she was talking about. Didn't know what had happened. Didn't know why hearing those words made me want to walk over and tell her that whoever made her feel that way was an idiot. But I did. Ava slowly turned, facing the hallway again, and started walking back toward her room. I thought that was the end of it. I thought she'd simply return to bed. Instead, she stopped directly outside my bedroom door. My heart skipped. She stood there, not moving, not speaking, just staring, or at least looking in my direction. I stayed completely still, not sure if she even knew I was there. 5 seconds passed. 10. 15. Then Ava took one step forward, toward my room, and another. My pulse immediately doubled. She wasn't awake. That much was obvious. But somehow that made the situation even stranger. She crossed the threshold, entered my room, and stopped at the foot of my bed. The night light from the hallway cast a soft glow across her face. Enough for me to see the exhaustion there. Even in sleep. Even now. She looked tired. The kind of tired that lived deep inside a person. Ava lowered her gaze. Toward my bed. Toward me. Then her lips moved. And this time, I heard every word. I wish I had met you first. The world seemed to stop. Just for a second. My brain refused to process what I'd heard. Because there was no way that sentence could mean what it sounded like. No way. Ava stood there for another moment. Completely unaware of the chaos she just dropped into my life. Then she softly exhaled. Turned around. And walked out of the room. I remained frozen. Staring at the doorway long after she'd disappeared. My heart was pounding. My thoughts racing. Trying to make sense of something that made absolutely no sense. I barely slept the rest of the night. And somehow, morning turned out to be even worse. Morning should have made things less awkward. Instead, it made them worse. Because Ava remembered absolutely nothing. I walked into the kitchen at 7:05. She was already there. Standing by the coffee maker. Wearing a navy blue blazer. Hair pulled back. One hand wrapped around a coffee mug. The other scrolling through emails on her phone. Completely normal. Completely unaware. And somehow that made me even more uncomfortable. Morning, she said. Morning. She glanced up. Then frowned. You look terrible. I laughed. You too. Fair. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The coffee machine gurgled. Traffic hummed outside. My brain kept replaying the same sentence. I wish I had met you first. Again. And again. And again. Ava took a sip of coffee. Didn't sleep. I nearly choked. The irony was brutal. Not really. Me neither. She rubbed her eyes. Then gave a tired smile. I spent half the night dreaming. My pulse jumped. What about? Ava stared into her coffee. Then shrugged. No idea. I looked away immediately. Because somehow I felt guilty. Like I'd read a page of her diary without permission. The rest of breakfast was awkward. At least for me. Ava seemed completely normal. Meanwhile, I was trying very hard not to think about what had happened 6 hours earlier. By the time she left for work, I had convinced myself it meant nothing. People said weird things in their sleep. Random things. Meaningless things. Dreams weren't reality. End of story. Unfortunately, the next few days made that explanation harder and harder to believe. Saturday afternoon, I was fixing a loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen when Ava came home carrying 3 grocery bags. She immediately stopped. What are you doing? Fixing this. It wasn't broken. It squeaked. Ava blinked. You fixed a cabinet because it squeaked? Yes. She stared at me, then started laughing. Actually laughing. The kind that sneaks up on you unexpectedly. For the first time since she'd moved in. And honestly, completely changed her face. People always talk about beautiful smiles. Most of them are overrated. Ava's wasn't, because it looked rare, like something she didn't use very often, and that made it impossible not to notice. She caught me looking. My brain immediately stopped working. Why are you staring at me? I wasn't. You were. I was looking at the cabinet. The cabinet is behind me. Exactly. Ava narrowed her eyes. I lost the argument. Immediately, a smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. A small victory smile. And for some reason, that made me smile too. Later that evening we ordered takeout. A completely normal roommate thing. At least that's what I told myself. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, eating noodles, watching a terrible action movie. And slowly, something unexpected happened. Conversation became easy. Really easy. Hours passed without either of us noticing. We talked about work, favorite books, embarrassing childhood stories, bad first jobs, the worst dates we'd ever been on. That conversation got interesting fast. My worst date brought his mother. I nearly dropped my fork. He what? His mother. No. Yes. Why? Ava laughed. I still don't know. I shook my head. You win. I know. No one can beat that. Exactly. For a moment she smiled. Then her expression softened. You? What? Worst date. I hesitated. Then sighed. She spent the entire evening texting another guy. Ouch. Yeah. Ava looked genuinely offended on my behalf, which was weirdly adorable. People are awful. Some are. A brief silence followed. Comfortable this time. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. Then Ava spoke quietly. Not everyone. Our eyes met. Just for a second. Long enough for something strange to happen inside my chest. Long enough that I had to look away first. And suddenly I realized something dangerous. I wasn't looking forward to having a roommate anymore. I was looking forward to seeing Ava. Every day. And that was a completely different problem. The problem was that once I noticed Ava, I couldn't stop noticing her. It started with little things. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. The way she always stole the blue blanket from the couch. The way she smiled at animals before she smiled at people. Tiny things. The kind of things you only notice when someone starts taking up more space in your thoughts than they should. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. And somewhere along the way, our apartment stopped feeling like an apartment. Started feeling like home. Friday evening found us sitting at the kitchen table. A thunderstorm rattled the windows. Rain hammered against the glass. The city outside had dissolved into a blur of lights and reflections. Ava was working on her laptop, or pretending to. I was doing exactly the same thing. Every few minutes one of us would look up, catch the other looking, then immediately look away, like a pair of teenagers. It was ridiculous. Then her phone buzzed. Everything changed. Immediately, the smile disappeared from her face. Her shoulders stiffened, and the color drained from her cheeks. I noticed instantly, because lately I noticed everything. You okay? Ava locked the screen. Too quickly. Yeah. The answer came fast. Too fast. A lie. A bad one. I leaned back in my chair. You sure? I'm fine. Another lie. This one even worse. The room became quiet. The rain filled the silence. Ava stared at the table, then at the window, anywhere except at me. Finally she stood. I think I'm going to bed. It was only 8:40. Ava never went to bed before midnight. Not once since moving in. That alone told me something was wrong. She paused near the hallway, then looked back. For a second it seemed like she wanted to say something. Instead she forced a smile. Good night, Mason. Good night. Her bedroom door closed, and stayed closed. The next morning she was gone before I woke up. No coffee, no breakfast, no sarcastic comments about my terrible taste in music. Nothing. The apartment felt strangely empty. By Sunday evening I was worried. Not because Ava seemed sad, because she seemed distant, like she'd put a wall between us overnight. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The wall stayed there. Then Thursday happened. I came home carrying groceries. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Ava's bedroom door was slightly open. I wasn't planning to look. Honestly. Then I heard crying. Very soft. Almost impossible to hear. But definitely crying. I froze. The sound came again. My chest tightened. Every instinct told me to walk away. To respect her privacy. To pretend I hadn't heard it. But another part of me remembered something. A woman standing in my room at 2 in the morning. A woman whispering words she never meant me to hear. A woman who looked exhausted long before sunrise. I set the groceries down, walked toward the door, and knocked gently. Silence. Then, "I'm fine." I almost laughed. It was becoming her favorite lie. "Ava." Nothing. "Ava, open the door." More silence. Then finally, the door opened, and my heart sank. Her eyes were red, her face pale, like she hadn't slept properly in days. For a second neither of us spoke. Then she looked away, embarrassed. "I look awful. You look upset." Ava swallowed. Her eyes immediately filled with tears again. And suddenly I knew. Whatever happened had nothing to do with work. Nothing to do with stress. Nothing to do with lack of sleep. This was personal. Very personal. The problem was, I still had no idea what secret she had been carrying since the day she moved in. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Ava stood in the doorway. I stood in the hallway. And whatever she had been trying to hide was written all over her face. The problem was, she clearly didn't want to talk about it. I should have left. Probably. Instead I asked, "Who was texting you?" Ava immediately looked down. There it was. The reaction. The confirmation. Someone. Not something. Someone. A long silence followed. Then she laughed softly. Not because anything was funny. The opposite. "You ever spend months convincing yourself you're over something?" I leaned against the door frame. "Yeah." "And then one text message destroys all that progress?" My stomach tightened. Because suddenly I knew where this was going. An ex. Of course. It was always an ex. Ava looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. Like she'd been carrying a weight nobody else could see. "He called." I didn't say anything. She continued staring at the floor. "He hasn't contacted me in 7 months. 7 months. That wasn't recent. That was long enough to start rebuilding your life. Long enough to think the worst was behind you. What did he want?" Ava laughed again. That same sad laugh. "He misses me." I immediately hated him. Without ever meeting him. Without knowing his name. Without knowing the story. I hated him. Because the look on Ava's face told me everything. People don't cry over healthy relationships ending. They cry over damage. Over disappointment. Over wounds that never healed correctly. Ava crossed her arms. Almost like she was cold. "He said he's changed." I rolled my eyes. She noticed. A tiny smile appeared. The first one all week. "Yeah. Exactly." The smile disappeared just as quickly. "He wants to meet." The apartment suddenly felt very quiet. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Somewhere downstairs a dog barked. Neither of us spoke. Finally I asked, "Do you want to?" Ava didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. Because if the answer had been yes, she would have said it instantly. Instead she looked toward the window. Then quietly said, "I don't know." The words sounded honest. Painfully honest. "I thought I was over him." Another pause. "I thought moving here fixed everything. It doesn't work like that." Ava looked at me. No. I shrugged. "You can move across the country. You can change jobs. Change apartments. Change cities. But eventually your problems catch up." For a moment she stared at me, then slowly nodded. Like someone who already knew that. Someone who just wished it wasn't true. The silence stretched again. Then Ava surprised me. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "If he really changed." She hesitated. "If someone hurt you once." A pause. "Do they deserve a second chance?" That question wasn't about him. Not really. It was about her. About whether she could trust herself again. Whether she could survive being hurt twice. I thought carefully before answering. Because this felt important. People deserve second chances. Ava listened. But trust doesn't. Her eyes lifted toward mine. I continued. Trust has to be earned again. Neither of us spoke. The words settled between us. Then Ava quietly sat on the edge of her bed, looking smaller than usual somehow. Less guarded. Less distant. Just tired. Really tired. A few moments passed. Then she whispered, "You know what's pathetic?" "What?" A weak smile appeared. "I was doing better before he called." I sat down in the chair beside her desk. "Then keep doing better. It's not that easy." "I know." Ava looked at me, and for the first time since she'd moved in, I saw fear. Real fear. Not sadness. Not stress. Fear. What if I never get over it? The question came out barely above a whisper. I looked at her for a second, then answered honestly. "Maybe you're not supposed to." She frowned. "What?" "Getting over someone isn't the goal." Ava stared. "The goal is moving forward anyway." Silence. Then something unexpected happened. A tear rolled down her cheek. Then another. And another. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just quiet tears from someone who had been strong for too long. Without thinking, I moved closer. Ava didn't pull away. Didn't look away. Didn't hide. She simply sat there and let herself be vulnerable. For the first time. Then she asked the question I never saw coming. "Mason?" "Yeah." Her voice was barely audible. "When someone good comes into your life." She swallowed. "How do you stop being afraid they'll leave too?" And suddenly, I realized this story had never really been about her ex at all. It was about what he had left behind. The question caught me off guard. Not because I didn't understand it. Because I understood it perfectly. Too perfectly. Ava wasn't talking about her ex anymore. She wasn't talking about the past. She was talking about now. About this apartment. About us. The realization hit me all at once. And judging by the way she immediately looked away, she realized it too. The room became painfully quiet. Ava wiped her eyes, then forced a laugh. "Forget I asked that." "No." She looked up. "No. No." For a second I considered saying nothing. Taking the easy way out. Staying safe. Then I remembered the night she stood in my room. The night she whispered words she never meant me to hear. And suddenly being careful felt impossible. "I don't think you ever stop being afraid." Ava listened. I continued. "I think you just decide someone is worth the risk." Neither of us spoke. The silence stretched. Long enough for both of us to understand what was happening. Long enough that looking away became impossible. Then Ava asked quietly, "Have you ever felt that way?" I should have lied. I should have changed the subject. Instead I answered, "Yeah." Her heartbeat seemed visible in her throat. "When?" I looked at her. Directly at her. And suddenly there was no point pretending anymore. "Right now." Ava froze. Completely. For one terrifying second I wondered if I just destroyed everything. The apartment. The friendship. All of it. Then her eyes filled with tears again. Not sad tears this time. Different. Softer. Almost relieved. "Mason." My name sounded different in her voice. Warmer. Closer. "I don't know what I'm doing." "Neither do I." That actually made her laugh. A small shaky laugh. But a real one. And somehow that felt like progress. A huge amount of progress. Ava looked down at her hands. Then spoke so quietly I almost missed it. "I was terrified when I moved here." I stayed silent, letting her continue. "I didn't know anyone. My relationship was over. My life felt like a disaster." A small pause. "And then I met you." My chest tightened. Ava smiled sadly. "You made everything feel easy." The words landed harder than any confession. Because they were honest. Painfully honest. She wasn't talking about romance. Not yet. She was talking about trust. About feeling safe. About finding someone who made life hurt less. And somehow that meant even more. Then Ava took a slow breath. And finally told me the truth. The whole truth. Her ex wasn't just an ex. He had spent years making her feel small. Years convincing her she wasn't enough. Smart enough. Pretty enough. Successful enough. Nothing she did was ever quite right. Nothing she gave was ever enough. And the worst part? She'd believed him. For a long time, longer than she wanted to admit. By the time she finally left, she barely recognized herself. The confident woman she'd once been was gone, replaced by someone constantly second-guessing everything. Every decision, every word, every feeling, including this one, including us. When she finally finished talking, darkness had fallen outside. The room was illuminated only by the desk lamp beside her bed. A soft golden light, the kind that makes everything feel more honest. Ava looked exhausted, but lighter, like she'd finally put down something she'd been carrying for years. Then she looked at me, really looked at me, and quietly asked, "Do you know what scares me the most?" "What?" A tear slipped down her cheek. Not from sadness, from vulnerability. "That I started liking you weeks ago." My heart stopped, actually stopped. Ava laughed nervously, and immediately looked away, embarrassed, as if she'd revealed too much. But she wasn't finished. "That night," my pulse jumped. "The night I sleepwalked. I already knew where this was going. Or at least I thought I did." Then Ava said something that surprised even me. "I don't remember saying it." A pause. "But I remember dreaming it." The room seemed to disappear, just for a second. "Mason," her voice trembled. "I really did wish I had met you first." And suddenly every moment between us finally made sense. For a moment, neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to hide. No misunderstandings. No half-truths. No pretending. Just two people sitting across from each other with their hearts completely exposed. And honestly, that was terrifying. Ava looked down first, a nervous smile appearing at the corner of her mouth. "I probably shouldn't have said that." I laughed softly. "Why?" "Because now you know." "I already knew." Her eyes widened. "What?" I leaned back slightly. "Ava." A smile tugged at my mouth. "You literally walked into my room in the middle of the night and told me." That earned the first genuine laugh I'd heard from her all week. A real laugh. Bright, warm, beautiful. The kind that made me wonder why she ever hid it. She covered her face with her hands. "Oh my God. What? I hate this." I laughed. "No, you don't." Ava peeked through her fingers, then reluctantly smiled. "No." A pause. "I don't." The room suddenly felt lighter, like we'd both been carrying the same secret for weeks, and neither of us had realized the other person already knew. Then Ava's expression softened. "Mason." "Yeah." She hesitated. "I think you're the first person who's ever made me feel safe." The words hit harder than any declaration of love, because I knew what they cost her. Trust wasn't easy for Ava. Not after everything she'd told me. Not after years of being hurt. Yet somehow, here she was, giving it to me anyway. I moved closer. Not much. Just enough that our knees touched. Neither of us pulled away. The distance between us had been disappearing for weeks. This was simply the first time we acknowledged it. Ava looked down, then back up, then down again, nervous, which was honestly adorable. "Can I ask you something?" "Depends." A small smile appeared. "That's not an answer." "Ask." She took a breath, then finally said it. "When did you start liking me?" I laughed immediately, because the answer was embarrassing. Very embarrassing. Ava narrowed her eyes. "Oh no." "What?" "It was early, wasn't it?" I rubbed the back of my neck. "Maybe." "Mason." "Fine." Ava folded her arms. "Waiting." I surrendered. "The cabinet." Her forehead wrinkled. "What cabinet?" "The kitchen cabinet." Confusion. Then realization. Then laughter. A lot of laughter. "You liked me because I laughed at you fixing a cabinet?" "It wasn't the cabinet." "Then what was it?" I smiled. "The smile." Ava stopped laughing. The room became quiet again. Not awkward. Just honest. "You hardly smiled when you moved in." I continued. "You looked exhausted all the time. You looked sad." Ava lowered her eyes. I kept going. "Then one day you laughed." A pause. "And suddenly the apartment felt different." For a moment neither of us spoke. Then Ava whispered, "That's ridiculously sweet." "I know. It's annoying." "I know." That made her laugh again. Then she did something unexpected. She reached for my hand. Slowly, carefully, like she was still getting used to the idea that she was allowed to. Our fingers intertwined, and neither of us let go. Outside, rain continued tapping against the windows. Inside, everything felt calm, peaceful, like the world had finally stopped fighting us for a minute. Ava looked at our hands, then quietly asked, "What happens now?" The question hung between us. I thought about it, then smiled. "Now? Yeah." I squeezed her hand gently. "Now I take you to dinner." Ava laughed. "That's your plan. Pretty solid plan. That's all you've got?" "Pretty much." She shook her head, still smiling, then leaned closer. Close enough that I could see the tiny freckles across her nose. Close enough that my heartbeat immediately forgot how to behave. And quietly, very quietly, she said, "I'd like that." Then she kissed me. Not dramatic, not like a movie. Better. Because it was real. Because it was Ava. Because after weeks of late-night conversations, stolen glances, shared dinners, and feelings neither of us knew how to talk about, it finally felt simple. When we pulled apart, she was smiling. That same smile. The one that ruined me from the beginning. And for the first time since she'd moved in, Ava Collins looked genuinely happy. For the first time in months, Ava slept. Really slept. No pacing. No nightmares. No waking up every hour. No staring at the ceiling until sunrise. The next morning I woke up before my alarm. At first I couldn't figure out why. Then I remembered. The conversation. The confession. The kiss. A smile appeared before I even opened my eyes, which was ridiculous. I was a grown man, yet somehow I felt like a teenager. I walked into the kitchen and immediately stopped. Ava was already there, making pancakes, actual pancakes, not coffee, not cereal, not something grabbed on the way out the door. Pancakes. I stared. She glanced over her shoulder. "Good morning. What happened?" Ava laughed. "What do you mean? You cooked." "I know how to cook." "No." I pointed dramatically. "You own pans." She rolled her eyes, then smiled. And there it was again. That smile. The one that made the entire room brighter. "Sit down." I obeyed. Mostly because I was hungry. Partly because I liked being told what to do by Ava. Though I wisely kept that information to myself. Breakfast felt different. Not because anything had changed. Because everything had. We still sat at the same table. Drank the same coffee. Looked out the same kitchen window. Yet somehow the entire apartment felt warmer. Ava noticed it too. I could tell. Because every few minutes she'd smile to herself for no reason. Then immediately try to hide it. Which never worked. Around noon her phone rang. Both of us froze. The mood changed instantly. Ava stared at the screen. The smile vanished. I recognized the reaction immediately. Him. The ex. Ava looked at me, then back at the phone. Continued ringing. Neither of us spoke. Finally she answered. "Hello." Her voice was calm. Much calmer than I expected. I listened from the kitchen while pretending not to listen. A completely impossible task. Several seconds passed. Then a minute. Then two. Eventually Ava stood, walked toward the living room, and closed the door behind her. I didn't hear the conversation, but I didn't need to, because 20 minutes later she came back. And she was smiling. Not sad. Not upset. Smiling. A real smile. Relief. Freedom. Something had changed. I stood immediately. "You okay?" Ava nodded. Then laughed. Actually laughed. And suddenly I realized. She looked lighter. Like someone had removed a backpack she'd been carrying for years. "What happened?" Ava walked toward me. Stopped. And shook her head. I said goodbye. The words were simple. But I understood their weight. Years of pain. Years of doubt. Years of wondering what could have been. Gone. Finished. Ava exhaled slowly. Then smiled again. "I should have done it months ago." I stepped closer. "Probably." She nodded. "Definitely." For a second neither of us spoke. Then Ava surprised me. Again. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, opened something, and handed it to me. It was a draft message. Never sent. Written months earlier. A goodbye text. The one she'd wanted to send. The one she'd been too afraid to send. At the very bottom was a sentence. A single sentence. I read it twice, then looked up. Ava was watching me. Waiting. The sentence said, "I think I'm staying because I'm afraid nobody will ever make me feel safe again." My chest tightened. Because I knew exactly why she wanted me to read it. She wasn't showing me the past. She was showing me how far she'd come. Slowly, I handed the phone back. Ava slipped it into her pocket. Then asked, "Can I tell you a secret?" I smiled. "You've told me a lot of secrets. One more." "Okay." Ava took a breath, then looked directly into my eyes. The night I sleepwalked, my heartbeat instantly accelerated. She laughed. "I knew you'd react like that. Because you traumatized me." Ava rolled her eyes, then continued. "I didn't remember the words." A pause. "But I remembered the feeling." The room became quiet. "I remember dreaming about meeting someone." She swallowed. "Someone who made me feel calm." Another pause. "Someone who made life easier." Her voice softened. "And when I finally remembered the dream," a smile appeared. "It was you." For a moment neither of us spoke. Because there wasn't much left to say. Sometimes life gives you complicated stories. Twists, drama, chaos. Sometimes it gives you something simpler. A second chance. A safe place. A person who arrives exactly when you need them. And somehow, that felt even more extraordinary. Over the next few weeks, life settled into something neither of us had expected. Normal. Not perfect. Not dramatic. Just good. And after everything Ava had been through, good felt extraordinary. We still lived together. Still shared the same apartment. The same kitchen. The same couch. The same arguments about whose turn it was to buy groceries. Only now there was a lot more smiling. And a lot more touching. Small things. A hand on my shoulder when she walked past. Her stealing my hoodie. Me bringing her coffee before she even asked. The kind of things that slowly become part of everyday life. One evening we were sitting on the balcony watching the sunset. Ava had her feet resting on the railing. A dangerous habit I constantly complained about. She ignored me every single time. "You're going to fall." "I'm not." "You definitely are." She smiled. "No." I pointed. "That's exactly what people say before they fall." Ava laughed, then leaned her head against my shoulder. And suddenly the conversation didn't seem very important anymore. The city glowed beneath us. Cars moved through the streets. People hurried home. Life continued. For a while neither of us spoke. Then Ava quietly said, "I used to think being happy would feel bigger." "What do you mean?" She thought for a second. "I thought it would be fireworks." A pause. "Some huge life-changing moment." I nodded. Instead, a smile appeared. "It's mostly this." I looked at her. "This?" Ava nodded. "Being able to sit next to someone and feel peaceful." The words settled somewhere deep inside my chest. Because she was right. The best parts of life rarely announce themselves. They happen quietly, one ordinary evening at a time. A month later, Ava had her final appointment with her therapist before moving to monthly sessions. She was nervous all morning, pretending she wasn't, which fooled absolutely nobody, least of all me. When she returned home that afternoon, she dropped her bag on the floor and immediately hugged me. A very good sign. "That went well." Ava smiled into my shoulder. "Really well." I felt relief wash through me. Then she stepped back, her eyes brighter than I'd seen them in months. "What did she say?" Ava laughed. "She said she barely recognizes the person who first walked into her office." That made me smile. Because honestly, neither did I. The woman who moved into this apartment had looked exhausted, lost, like she was carrying the world on her back. The woman standing in front of me now looked alive. Not healed completely. Nobody heals that way. But stronger, lighter, hopeful. And maybe that was even better. That night we ordered takeout from the terrible Chinese restaurant down the street. The one we both claimed to hate. The one we somehow ordered from every week. Halfway through dinner Ava looked at me. Really looked at me. Then started laughing. "What?" She shook her head. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "I almost didn't rent this apartment." I nearly dropped my fork. What? Ava nodded. I had another place lined up. My heart stopped. What? It fell through 2 days before I moved. I stared at her, completely horrified. Ava was enjoying this far too much. You almost gave me a heart attack. She laughed harder. I'm serious. For a moment we just looked at each other, thinking about how different everything could have been. Different apartment, different roommate, different life. No late-night conversations, no shared dinners, no first kiss, no us. The thought was unsettling. Ava must have felt the same thing, because her smile slowly faded, and she reached for my hand. I'm glad it happened. My fingers tightened around hers. Me too. Ava looked down, then quietly admitted, best mistake I ever made. The apartment fell silent, comfortable, warm, home. And suddenly I remembered the first night. The hallway, the darkness, the whispered words. I wish I had met you first. Back then those words had confused me. Now they made perfect sense. Not because Ava had found someone perfect. I wasn't. Far from it. But because she had finally found someone who stayed. Someone who listened. Someone who cared. Someone who made her feel safe. And somehow, she'd done the same thing for me. Ava squeezed my hand. What are you thinking about? I smiled. The first night. Her face immediately turned red. Oh no. Oh yes. Mason. You walked into my room. Ava covered her face. I hate this story. It's my favorite story. She laughed despite herself, then leaned over and kissed me. Slow, warm, familiar. The kind of kiss that feels like coming home. When she pulled away, she rested her forehead against mine and smiled. The same smile that changed everything. The same smile I noticed beside a squeaky kitchen cabinet. The same smile I'd probably spend the rest of my life looking for every morning. And honestly, that sounded pretty good to me.